Hello YouTube, it's July 3rd, 2021. I think I'm more than a couple weeks behind on uploading these vlogs, so yeah, when they do all hit the internet, it's probably going to be kind of weird for anybody who's actually following what's going on with me. But anyway, gosh, so many changes since the last one of these I filmed. Pretty sure the last one was when I was on my way for orientation at VIP Taxi. For the most part, that went really well. There were some struggles. It ended up just being Carl and I, and he just kind of went through his spiel when I tried to basically interject that, you know, there were things that I didn't know about, you know, the current way that VIP Taxi is operated and dispatched and handles vouchers and stuff, rather than concentrating on those things and allowing me to talk, which is basically the way I learn, you know, and allow me to do things, which is also the way I learn. What he wanted was me to just basically sit and listen. And it's kind of funny. He's like, well, because, you know, it's like, well, it's kind of redundant. It's like, yeah, but we'll, you know, but I guarantee you're going to say that you weren't told this. And, you know, the reality is I you know, I will make, if I'm not learning by doing, and I think this is, from what I've read, this is also a thing that kind of goes hand in hand with my mental illness. And also people that are, you know, high functioning on the autism spectrum. I learn by doing, and by routine, not by just being told stuff repeatedly. You know, that doesn't really go in. In fact, when I'm forced to listen to a long presentation, more often than not, it doesn't hold my attention well enough for me to learn from it. So if I'm sitting there quietly watching you, 75% of what is being said is probably going in one ear out the other. If we're engaged and we're both talking at the same time, I'm a lot more likely to retain it all. Anyway, suffered through that. It took an extremely long time, but, you know, made it through it. Met one of the higher ups, I forget his name, but he asked me questions and seemed pretty jovial, so I was, you know, he asked what I had for experience, you know, with taxis, so I, you know, volunteered some. I mean, my God, you know, I could vlog for hours and hours and hours about my experience as a cab driver, but yeah, it's you know, of course I was eager to tell him some of you know, my experience in chronological order, starting at the beginning. So of course I didn't get anywhere near when I worked for VIP Taxi, and the main thing he needed from me was a UA, which fortunately I passed, which I was a little nervous about, as I've been around a lot of people that have been smoking weed since it's now legal in Arizona, and, you know, all sorts of places where I'm at, people are smoking it. Sometimes in confined areas. So, anyway, at one point, the guy, the higher up, you know, that was handling the UA, God, I wish I could remember his name and what his actual position is. Anyway, struck me as a very likable guy. In fact, struck me as somebody to really enjoy, you know, conversing with. But he, well, at one point I came back with the, you know, with the pee in the cup to be tested, and to be honest, I expected it was going to be, you know, sent out of house and processed by somebody else. From what Carl explained, the UA is a requirement of the insurance company, so I, you know, figure it's probably going to have to be sent to whoever the insurance company contracts with. But apparently that's not how it works. Apparently those cups, he tested it right there. What he did to test it, honest to God, I didn't even see. It happened so quick, I didn't, you know, I was focused elsewhere and didn't realize it had happened. But yeah, mid-conversation, he's just like, oh, well, you know, go ahead and take that cup back, dump it in the toilet, wash your hands, and then come back and put the cup in that basket. And he had like a special waste basket for that. And I could see there were other, you know, of the sample cups in that basket. And that struck me as a really flawed instruction, because it would seem to me that of those 3 things to do, dump the piss, wash your hands, dispose of the pee cup, that wash your hands should be the last thing that I do. It didn't seem right to me to dump the pee cup, wash my hands, and then continue to handle the pee cup. But, you know, so anyway, yeah, so I went and quickly dumped the pee cup, and then I walked back and I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna need to go back and wash my hands. I'll be right back. And apparently that, I don't know if it was that or what it was, but all I know is that when I came back and he talked briefly and he was out, and then after he had left the room and was no longer in earshot, Carl continued his training there, basically showing me some videos which were more amusing. I found myself just analyzing the way the videos are made rather than taking in the content of the videos, because that's just kind of how I roll when there's video involved. Like I don't remember everything that was in the content of the videos, but I certainly remember that the first chunk was vertical video being displayed on a horizontal Sony television. So, you know, it's just like, why is this vertical video? And then when it did switch to horizontal, it was video of operating their tablets that they use for dispatch. But most of the time I could clearly see the reflection of the person shooting the film and the phone that the film was being shot with. I'm using the word film figuratively. The phone that the film was being shot with, I could see the reflection of it more clearly than I could what was actually on the screen of the tablet. So I'm hyper analytical like that. So I'm looking at that, and it was a real distraction from whatever I was supposed to be taking in on the video. And that's when Carl came at me with, well, you know, you don't need to. I had asked, it was actually right after that, I'd asked him a question about, like he had said, it'll come to me, he had said that, he told me a way to, you know, when somebody does a credit card, pays for a cash card, or, you know, pays for a fare with a credit card, how to scrutinize, you know, basically audit the slip that you're going to turn in to get paid with for it, to make sure that they didn't cheat the system, because it is possible for them to cheat the system, which bewilders me that that's put in the hands of the customer. But it's completely possible for the passenger to, you know, when the fare is over and I'm like, yeah, well, that'll be, you know, $14.85. It's very possible for them to hit a button that says flat rate and key in a flat amount, and then it'll prompt them for the card. They run the card, and rather than being charged what they were supposed to be charged, they get charged whatever amount they feel like keying in. Yeah, I think it's pretty crazy that that's in the hands of the customer and not in the hands of me on my terminal. But that's how they have it set up. So, you know, and of course inside I just want to be like, well, why is that way? You know, why is that? Why are the customers even given that control? You know, but I realize it's something that I can't change, and that probably Carl can't change. So, you know, trying to not focus on that being the bigger issue, and focus on what I'm supposed to do to make sure that I don't get screwed over by a customer that's been given the opportunity to do this. And I looked at it, and anyway, it said, you know, we'll check that out, and if it's not the complete amount, you need to call them out on it and say, hey, you know, you're going to need to run your card again for the remaining amount. And at this point, the way he showed the system working, it has a cycle of call comes in, lands on you know, you accept the call, lands in on your screen, and then you pick up the passenger, you start running the meter. In the terminal, it goes from being, you know, being on approach to being hired, and then it goes to that thing with the credit card when you stop the time calculating on the meter. Once you hit time off, then it pops that screen to the the payment screen to process payment, or in the case of somebody just paying cash, hit cash and then hit print receipt. And it, which I think is funny, like back in the day, a receipt was always done by just filling out a card by pen. It was funny, I used to often have people ask, hey, just give me some blank ones. I'm like, okay, I'll have, knock yourself out with your tax fraud, dude. Here you go, have a whole pile of them. But anyway, yeah, so I would, so I just quickly asked, how my immediate question, barring the voices in my head that were screaming, hey, this is ridiculous that the customer should have that power to do that. My initial response was, well, how do I charge them again? As I was understanding the dispatch system as it had been explained to me thus far, is that in order to, for them to be given an opportunity to make a payment, there needed to be a call come in with their information on it, and then it needed to, meter needed to be run, put on time off and whatever. And then, so I asked that, and then he goes into a long-winded explanation, but kind of quickly went into, oh, well, you just simply, start the meter again, hit start, and then hit time off, and it'll prompt them for payment again. And he was gonna continue going, and at that point it was just like, I'm like, okay, good, got it. And he got really offended when I cut him off at that point and said, got it, because at that point I had it. It just seemed like it was, why should he waste his breath on whatever else he had to say? Because it seemed, I had it. Question asked and answered. Let's move forward. And he, that's when he started going on about how I shouldn't be talking. I should be sitting there listening, and that the others, higher up, whose office we were in, that had left, that handled the pea cup, and directed me to wash my hands while still handling the pea cup as opposed to after handling the pea cup. He said, he mentioned to me that there's something off about you, and didn't really proceed to say what it was, and probably that wasn't shared. Certainly my experience as somebody who's, mentally ill and thus not neurotypical, has been, people will often say things like, well, you're weird, but they never quantify what they mean by weird. They just say it as a blanket statement. And when called out on, well, how am I weird? You usually don't have an answer for that. Believe me, if I call somebody out and weird and they ask me how they're weird, I will go on at length as to how they're weird. And by the way, if you ever ask for an explanation on that, don't expect me to spare your feelings, because I probably won't. Anyway, moving on. Yeah, so he told me that, and I just kind of jovial came, just I've been reading listening to a lot of videos about autism and Asperger's on YouTube, which is not what my diagnosis is, but certainly there's a lot of things in there that coincide with me. Oh, by the way, I asked my therapist about that finally, and she said, well, her response was, oh no, Asperger's. If you had Asperger's, you couldn't even have this conversation with me, which was a little disappointing, because from what I've been learning about Asperger's, that is a common incorrect assumption, and it was very disappointing to hear that from my therapist, who's somebody, in the mental, works at a mental health clinic as a professional. But anyway, and I just kind of let that go and went forward. I actually pressed forward a little bit with her, and she did tell me it's something I should bring up with my doctor, not with her. So helpful, thank you, I guess. I do like my therapist a lot. I do think my sessions with her help me a lot, if for no other reason than it forces me to get things out and process them by myself, much as these vlogs have. Anyway, anyway, back to Carl, in the concept, which I've never heard this term before, but in the videos about Asperger's and autism spectrum disorders, for people who are high functioning as myself, the term that's commonly used is masking, which is basically, rather than doing what comes naturally to you and what's in your mind, basically trying to ape the neurotypical and give rehearsed responses to things, so people won't think that won't think that I'm weird. Anyway, when Carl had said, the higher up at the cab company, I wish I would have caught his name and position. I don't recall his name, but I recall his position. I wish I'd asked him for a card, is what I wish I had done. Anyway, he, because then I'd have something on paper to remember. I always do better when I have things I can go back and reference on paper. So anyway, he said, oh my gosh, I just realized I don't know where my cab paper slip is. It's gotta be in the car here. No, it's at home. All right. Anyway, I've already got a response to, well, he says you're off, and that was oh yeah, I get that a lot. I smiled as I said it, which seemed to satisfy Carl. At which point he went on with well, this is just really weird for you to say things. We're used to people that just sit here and just quietly listen and then maybe ask a couple questions afterwards. And I'm thinking to myself, that's probably why so many cab drivers hit the road so ill-prepared for being a cab driver. If that's how they are, if they're not being engaged during the training process, they're just kind of going through the motions. So everybody's going through the motions, they hit the road, they're intimidated out of asking questions, then they're going to not really be prepared for the realities of being a cab driver. Anyway, but at that point I just was like, okay, this is how we're going to operate here, so I'm just going to sit here and be quiet. And it also occurred to me that as I'm nervous about him jarring his memory about issues with me here in the past at this company, it was probably in my best interest to just probably shut up and just let him get in his zone of wasting our time and forward to the point where I could do my ride along and then get into a cab. So long story short, because I'm sitting here at the cab company, I've already wasted 30 minutes of time where I could possibly get a cab on a day where I've been told there was probably not going to be an available unless I get here early. I do want to vlog more about what happened there and what happened my first 48 hours in a cab and my ride along, which was also very ridiculous. It was like a classic example of somebody with mental illness trying to interact, somebody high functioning and smart with mental illness trying to interact with somebody neurotypical who's clearly not very bright. Not stupid, I'm not calling him stupid, but he clearly wasn't very bright. Anyway, and there's so many defenses with people like that. I mean, not that I don't have my own defenses, but it's for someone like myself, it's just crazy to watch the defenses of the others that aren't as well masked. Anyhow, so yeah, that went fine, and also largely felt like a waste of my time and things I could have learned. Like, I just really wasn't learning anything from that experience. The only thing I really learned from that experience in watching the way he drove and interacted with customers is that the cameras, which I was kind of nervous about, all VIP taxis have cameras inside and out, basically watching the road and then watching the activities inside the cab, and I was kind of nervous about that. And after my roughly 3 hours of riding along with that driver, and I also forgot his name, yeah, I realized I have absolutely nothing to worry about with the way I interact and converse with passengers and the way I drive. Yeah, I have nothing to worry about. So that's the most I got out of the ride along. I did get a little more real-time basics on how to operate the dispatch tablet, and the biggest thing is I noticed that the things that he did were very different than what Carl had explained that I would be doing redundantly numerous times, which I find interesting because Carl drives a lot, so it would seem to me that he would be more intimately familiar with how it works as his other driver was. So anyway, c'est la vie. After that, I drove nearly 48 hours. After expenses, now granted, those are very limited expenses because my first day was free, my second day was heavily reduced. But after all was said and done, I did take home over $700. That's also after expenses of gas. Actually, it might be a little under $700, because come to think of it, when I did my tallying on how much I spent for gas, I don't think I included one full tank of gas, which I did on my Costco card. So anyway, roughly $700 what I took home. I am still sitting on, I believe, 3 or 4 more vouchers, which I need to make time to touch base with Carl, because I'm a little unclear on how to do those. But I'm pretty sure I've retained all the forms and information needed to do that, and he did say I've got a 7-day period to redeem those, which I think is funny, because I know I'm sitting on a stash of vouchers from like 13 years ago. So those are past the 1-week period. I won't be able to redeem those, unfortunately. But yeah, I will get those. As far as how much money is in those, I don't think there's much money in those. I think between all of them, there's probably maybe $30. But it's hey, $30 is $30. Anyway, I have a Shure microphone in here that I need to hide. It is not mine. Belongs to the owner of Bullock's. Oh my gosh, I had probably my first negative interaction with him. He seemed very bothered that I called him to explain what was going on with that. But I don't know what he was doing. He could have been golfing, he could have been having a dinner with his family, you know. But I mean, as a business owner who's on call, I mean, when I owned and operated Express Cab, I got calls. Shit, I got calls from drivers while I was in the process of having sex with my fiance, and I had to basically, you know, hey, honey, put this aside. I'm the owner of the company. I need to deal with this. But yeah, you kind of, you know, and honestly, I don't mind somebody bluntly cutting me off, as long as they're, you know, I'm trying to explain what I feel I need to explain, and he just bluntly cut me off. It's like, hey, what is this? Why are you calling me about this? And it was probably good, because I was probably rambling about, you know, the whole situation and what the problem with the mic was, and what my interaction with Gary was. It's been pretty much anything to do with karaoke system and whatnot. I've been, you know, I've been deferring to Gary, other than the thing of hooking up for the basketball games, which clearly wasn't a Gary issue. That was clearly a Jim issue. But yeah, those things I've just been deferring to, you know, any questions I have, I just take it to Gary. And for the most part, like, I know what I do and what I'm doing, and I know that I'm operating, you know, the PA and the house board a lot differently than Gary is, and I'm good. I'm fine with that. But yeah, this particular issue. So anyway, I'm doing it now. So I'm going, yeah, and see, I was wasting Jim's time on further introspection on it. So yeah, he's like, well, why are you bothering me about this? Or why are you calling me about this? And I'm like, well, because it's your microphone, and I definitely want to get your permission. What I at this point, what I need to do is take it home where I've got some bright lighting, and I have the internet to troubleshoot what the issue is with it. And I don't want to, you know, I need to make sure it's okay with you that I do this, and that I, you know, remove it for the bar. I want to make sure you're aware that, you know, of that. And he's like, oh yeah, that's fine, no problem. Just make sure it's back in place by Sunday. And I'm like, okay, thanks, Jim. And that was the end of that conversation. But it was kind of awkward at first, and I'm sure it was super awkward for him as well. You know, and I think that probably comes from the point that then an average karaoke host would have just been like, oh, you know, I don't want to deal with anything, not my problem, and would have just left it like it was. But I don't want to do another show with only my Voco Pro mic and what's left of my Audio-Technica mic. I definitely want that Shure back at my disposal. And even though I do have the money to buy good mics now, it doesn't make sense to me operating what's left of my karaoke business to take taxi money to pay for microphones for my karaoke business. I mean, there was a time that I did do that, and that's kind of how I got the karaoke business started. But at this point, I don't feel it makes good business sense to do that. Anything that's going into karaoke, I feel needs to come out of money being generated by karaoke, not taxi. I mean, based on how much money I made my first 48 hours of back as a cab driver, it doesn't even make sense to continue being a karaoke host. But at this point, I feel I'm so vested in it, and I enjoy it so much, I don't want to stop. But yeah, I'm sure I would have made more money had I continued the next 2 days, just driving that cab versus, you know, going and doing my show. But I'm certainly not going to just not show up and leave bullocks hanging like that for, you know, for selfish reasons like that. Anyway, wow, 25 minutes on this, and it's 35 after 8, so I need to get myself in there. I hope to God they have a cab for me. If not, there'll be a part 2 to this, you know, or continuation of this really shortly. Anyway, thanks for listening, and like and subscribe, doo-dah, doo-dah.